Know that in these events, being near the beach is maybe not so frightening because, as you say, you're just going to get rain and wind and maybe some sand coming in off the ocean. But you've got some buildings, I guess, to the east of you, huh? That's where some of this debris is coming from?
The only building we've got right here is the hotel, and a good chunk of debris has already flown off that hotel. Otherwise, it's a wide open parking lot and a lot of trees and branches. But because of the rain and because of the walls of rain, it's really tough to see what's coming. And with these silly looking goggles too, you're kind of blind.
Yeah, well, definitely necessary on this morning. Hey, Steve, what time did most people get out of Gulfport?
You know, Bridget, there was a curfew at 9 p.m. last night, in part for security reasons. With all these people evacuating, the police didn't want people going around robbing houses. So people were still leaving, though, after that curfew. Whoa! People were still leaving after that curfew went into effect. They were mainly taking the I-10, which is right behind me, heading east. People trying to get out of Mississippi any way they could. It was remarkable to hear statements by public officials. They were telling people, even if you don't have a place to go, just get in your car and go. Just get out of Mississippi. And it's really starting to make a lot of sense now.
Yeah, Steve, are you and your camera guy and producer?
Oh man, I'm getting out of here. Whoa! A big chunk of roof landed about 3 feet from me. I'll be back up next hour.
All right, Steve Harrigan reporting live from Gulfport, Mississippi. We're going to just continue to watch these pictures here for just a moment. I think you get some sense from Steve as to how fierce these winds are. I can tell you from personal experience.
Mississippi, Biloxi, Mississippi, Pascagoula, and further east in Mobile, Alabama, or Mobile rather, and also Gulf Shores, Alabama. That was the location where just about a year ago, in September of 2004, when Ivan came on shore, again a Category 3 storm at that time that brought so much damage throughout the area. I want to get back to our meteorologist, Rick Reichmuth of the Fox Weather Center, watching this storm, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Rick, what are you seeing now?
Yeah, you know, we're actually watching this
wraparound billboard, and look, it's been ripped to shreds. This last gust has taken care of that one. You can forget that, baby. This sign over here, this Treadwell Ford sign, is doing okay. Boy, that stings. But this band right now, Marshall and Heather, is about as bad as we've seen all morning. And fortunately, we're still able to get a picture out. We've got some good truck protection. Just keeping an eye out for flying debris. Fortunately, there's not a lot of trees around here, so we just watch out for these power lines. Woo, and these signs. Hardly anybody out on the roadway. And by the way, I wanted to update you again on that situation down on the Mobile River. Now we get a bit of a lull here. The oil tanker, which ripped from its moorings, they've got that shored up now with 3 tugboats. Took them a while. We still don't know if there's been any kind of oil leakage into the water there, but you can imagine how rough the Mobile Bay is and the surge flood concerns. That's why we pulled back yesterday afternoon to higher ground. We're a good 5 or 6 miles from the water. Let's spin around one more time and see the sign. Not anything new to show you in the past couple of minutes, but just feel you can maybe live vicariously through the camera and the TV of what it's like to be out during hurricane-force wind gusts. Once they get any higher, I can't really stand up. I've got to hold on to something, but you get a brief break and then all of a sudden, boom, it just hits you. Marshall and Heather, we're here. We're hanging out. Man, yeah, no matter how little.
It's Bayou La Batre. This is what we're talking about with the tide levels. This 7 foot already. To give you an idea where we're at, if you look over here, you can see this is the shrimp boat area. There's the J.A. Winsel Bridge. I'm getting wind gusts here of 52 miles per hour with sustained winds at about 35 miles per hour. And the water is already knee deep, and it's continuing to grow rather quickly. We've been here probably 2 minutes, and it's already a little bit higher than it was when we got here. This is the area that we were at last night, and we talked to a lot of shrimpers that said they were going to stay on their boat because they felt like it was the safest place to be. They had them tied down way away from the boat, And by doing so, it's able to actually come up a little bit with the tide and then the eventual storm surge. And there's another wind gust of 51 miles per hour. So that's the condition right now in Bayou La Battery. We're going to see how it changes, and we'll get back to you. Back to you guys.
All right, thank you very much for that report. And as we just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, the eye of the storm now of Hurricane Katrina continues to move in that northeasterly direction. The eye of the storm officially was over the state of Mississippi. As you can see there, as the storm continues to move beyond New Orleans, Louisiana, moving into Mississippi, eventually Alabama, and continuing in a north pass. And we want to go now to another reporter who filed this report for us from Gulfport, Mississippi.
Meteorologist Dennis Washington on the Alabama Gulf Coast as we're watching Hurricane Katrina make landfall. Extremely strong winds are pounding the coastal areas. Wind gusts now up to 80 miles per hour as the storm pushes its way further inland. The center of the storm is 150 miles away, but hurricane force winds are being felt all the way to the Alabama-Florida border. People here on the Alabama Gulf Coast were evacuated on Sunday. The ones that did not leave have decided to take shelter today until the worst of the storm passes late Monday evening. Reporting from the Alabama Gulf Coast, I'm meteorologist Dennis Washington, Fox News.
Gives you an idea of what we're getting up and down the Gulf Coast there. And Janice's watching it back here in our studio. We were talking earlier, Janice, about this, the radar system over New Orleans that's out. How does that hamper you doing the job?
People of New Orleans and the whole state of Louisiana, because we're getting what they must have already been through. And, you know, there's just there's words to describe it. There's just so much debris flying around, not only at the ground level that's tumbling across the road, but also up in the air. And I'm talking way up in the air, high up where the lights to the intersection or the interstate are. It's just absolutely incredible.
So, David, if you can, I know that earlier when you were speaking to Bridget Quinn here a few hours ago, you called this response, the American Red Cross's response to Hurricane Katrina, the largest mobilization of resources in Red Cross history. Can you clarify that? Because when we're thinking of all of the major disasters, this is certainly a huge one then.
Well, like I said earlier, this is the largest mobilization to a single disaster in Red Cross history. What we're doing is we sent out an all-hands-on-deck to every single chapter in America, asking the chapter personnel.
Then Katrina's winds peeled holes in the roof, causing leaks. Louisiana's governor says the people inside are safe. The storm is flooding homes in New Orleans, but the predictions of a 28-foot storm surge have been downgraded to 15 feet. That's still a pretty big storm surge, still enough to cause extensive flooding. And we've just learned a building in New Orleans was knocked down and people may be trapped inside. Emergency officials cannot reach that building.
Katrina hit land about 7:10 a.m. our time as a Category 4. The massive storm made landfall near the bayou town of Biloxi, Louisiana. Katrina is already being blamed on 3 deaths in Louisiana. One of the levees in New Orleans has already broken, flooding up to 9 feet expected in the city around that area. About 80% of the people who live in New Orleans did evacuate, but it is believed about 100,000 people remained, some in shelters of last resort, including the Superdome. You saw those pictures. As Mark just said, there are now 2 holes in the Superdome roof. Rain is pouring in when it's not so windy to keep the rain away. Let's head over to meteorologist Larry Mowry. Now he's tracking Katrina in the Local 6 headquarters. And Larry, the video
fury of Katrina is being felt along the Gulf Coast. It came ashore in Louisiana early this morning as a massive Category 4 hurricane with winds topping 145 miles per hour and giant waves that are threatening to overrun entire towns. New Orleans is one of those cities that could be in for a long day. Katrina turned to the east before hitting land, which means its weaker side is pounding the Big Easy. But already there are power outages and reports of damage to the Superdome's roof, where some 9,000 people are riding out the storm.
Watching this radar closely here, I've got reports of widespread.
The worst, and of course they had the most people, so obviously a cause for concern. Nancy Alvarez is joining us with more. Nancy, not a great night to be in the Superdome, probably.
No, certainly not at all. We're starting to get some great pictures here of what people on the Gulf Coast have been experiencing. We're already seeing windows blown out, roofs torn apart. Of course, there's one report of a building that's collapsed. Overall, significant damage to buildings, including the Superdome, where thousands of people sought shelter.
It is a refuge for 10,000 people.
All right, Kathleen Nolan with Cleco Power. Some good advice there. Thanks for the update.
Now, when you get hurricanes as powerful as Hurricane Katrina, we can also see lots of severe weather, including tornadoes. Let's bring in our severe weather expert, Dr. Greg Forbes. And Dr. Forbes, where's the greatest later on this morning here? Jim, tell us what you're experiencing right now and kind of give us a lay of what's going on as far as the water beginning to recede or what's happening there in Gulfport now.
And Kevin, do me a favor too, because I have no idea. I can't get any information at all. Let me know how far I am away from the center of this thing in Gulfport too, because we are just getting hammered with the west wind, enough so that every time I look out, there's something new to see. Right now, there's a huge water tower, probably about 5,000 foot or 5,000 gallon water tower laying on its side. It just blew over. Winds are very, very strong out of the west here, at least a strong tropical storm force gusts, and. This thing's just laying on its side here. Just took it right over, looks like a basketball sitting on top of a needle, but still, even an empty water tower laying over. I mean, it's just something I've never seen before. Water is receding, though. That is a very good thing. We could have dealt with historic storm surge here. Storm surge like we've never seen, even in Camille, possibly as high as 35 feet. We have to wait and confirm all that, and we will. But certainly from what we gather and what we have preliminarily, that's what it seems like we dealt with, which... want to look at this from a real estate standpoint. You've got all these beautiful casinos that are sitting right on the beach. We were talking about them the other day. We were in a hotel, 2 stories. That was probably completely underwater. Anything south of US 90, which was completely flooded by about 10 o'clock this morning, no question, sustained some tremendous amount of water damage as a result of the surge coming in. Wind damage as well. All the trees stripped clear of their leaves. There are power poles down. There's damage to roofs and structures like that. But the good news is everybody here is fine. The thing that worries us most, of course, is the fact that here in the Armed Forces facility that we have here, there are a lot of special needs people, probably about 50 or 6 of them, that are going to need some special needs at some point here in the near future. So hopefully this weather will wind down and we can get them the kind of medical attention that they need. So far, everybody's doing pretty good, said, and we're all kind of in this together and just kind of waiting it out. Kevin, back to you.
Well, Jim, to answer your first question, you wanted to know exactly where the center of Katrina was.
It's still well within its banks, but again, the bad weather is just now approaching. They've told us to expect things to get a lot worse as the afternoon progresses. Certainly by 7 o'clock tonight, things could be pretty bad, approaching tropical storm force winds in this area. Streets quiet. We can't show you a lot of the town because it's up from us a bit, but it was pretty quiet on the streets. And again, the schools have been closed. The University of Alabama has been closed, and they are telling business owners it's up to you if you want to shut your businesses down for the day, but they're encouraging people to avoid roads if they can. I don't know if this is significant or not. Just a little runoff here already from the rain that's coming down from the parking lot above us, but as you can see, with these heavy rains approaching, they are going to have issues with clearing water off of the streets here.
Rick, in terms of the boat, the owner there on the boat who runs the party boat behind you, we were hearing earlier that the shrimp boat captains were going to stay with their boats as well, and it seems to be, something that a captain might feel inclined to do and may or may not be the wisest thing, but it was interesting that he was saying he was going to be there basically to save his boat after the water recedes, right?
Well, yeah, you see these pilings here. These are big pieces of wood, like foam pole size. And he was saying that, that the river could easily rise above the height of the tallest piling there. And what he does is he rides those lines to guide the ship and keep it sort of away from those pilings. But then as the river starts coming down again, the bottom of the ship could be severely damaged if it hits the top of one of these pilings. So, he made it very clear he's got a big investment in this boat. And he doesn't want to lose it, so he's going to ride it out. Now, this is far from being as dangerous as certainly down on the Gulf, and people down there were encouraged to stay off their boats. On the river here, it's a lot safer, and he even told me that this line right here, this thick line right here, is his escape route. If things get out of control on that boat, he knows that he can grab a hold of that line and follow it to the shore and hopefully climb out of harm's way, Martha.
Hopefully it doesn't come to that. Rick, thank you very much. Rick Leventhal reporting from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We'll check back in with you later.
And this just in, out of Washington, or maybe more correctly Arizona, where the president is right now, Louisiana and Mississippi both have been declared major disaster areas by the president.
That will open the federal piggy bank for all kinds of loans and other programs to help folks there get back on their feet after this devastating storm. Hurricane Katrina rolls on, though, and just because it made landfall in those two states, your state might not be out of the woods. We'll explain more when we come back.
A good 20 feet over here to the right side, immediately next to this other dumpster right here. All of this trash that you see had been inside of the dumpsters. And walk with me this way. Back over here is a mattress that had been inside this empty dumpster. That's how strong this wind was. Those are seriously big mattresses. We were riding out the storm from about 11 o'clock to about 1 o'clock local time in our hotel. It's the Holiday Inn here in Covington, the only hotel open in town. All of the families were inside in the main area. There is a plate glass window that separates the pool on the inside from the pool on the outside. Part of that window just shattered. So there's damage even at the hotel where we are staying. We actually heard that falling glass. It was pretty frightening. Most of the people, though, in our part of the hotel were in their rooms just riding out the storms. They brought their dogs. They have their children there with them. There's no power in the entire area, and there's lots of downed tree limbs. There's lots of water in the streets. There's lots of people that are still huddling inside shelters. We understand at Covington High School there's still 330 or so people there. To the east of us in Slidell, Louisiana, on the east side of Lake Pontchartrain, we are hearing tales that almost every home and business has been touched by the winds and the rain of Hurricane Katrina. This is in St. Tammany Parish. In Plaquemines and St. Bernard's Parish, we're hearing reports of people calling in saying they too are stuck on their roofs because of the rising water. It's a very serious situation here. It's just calm enough now for us to go out and actually survey the extent of the damage here. So we're going to do that in just a few minutes and let you know just how serious the damage here is in St. Tammany Parish.
Dawn,
but that's the latest right here. The wind. Go ahead.
Sorry, does it look like law enforcement authorities?
And it just pulled in and braved the elements, and I figure these are the first live pictures out of here. Jane, you asked what would New Orleans do if it gets hit by the big one? It still doesn't know. For 40 years, New Orleans has missed it, and this time New Orleans missed it again. Not entirely, but this is the French Quarter. This is Bourbon Street. This is the Royal Sonesta Hotel, and you can see the balconies up. Third floor balcony is one of the places from which we were broadcasting last night and all morning, and up here on this one as well. And you see between those two are those windows that are white. Some of them have green shutters on the other side. As the winds were blowing more than 100 miles an hour, those were banging and crashing and falling off and becoming pieces of debris. Here's one of them that made it a little bit. The rest of them broke into a million pieces and have flown in all directions from but as you can see, most of the windows survived. From right down here, we saw a number of windows crash over here throughout the night. Let's spin that way. This is Bienville. This is the corner of Bourbon Street and Bienville. That's the old Absinthe House. Dates back to 1807, as you can see up there. And this is Bienville. No major structural damage, as we've been reporting since about 3 o'clock this morning. It became clear just about then that this storm was going to move to the east a little bit and that it had weakened by 25 miles an hour by the time it hit land, so not a whole lot of damage. You can see up here in the corners of this building, this is the Red Rhino, a pretty famous dance club, I guess you could say, and those windows blew out overnight. Here's what was so strange about the French Quarter in the middle of this hurricane. Everything that breaks or slaps, it echoes among these canyons in the building throughout the French Quarter. So it sounded like a war zone out here. But because the light had come up, we realized that things were not too bad. Look right down the street here. That transformers blew just down here. On the right here is Arno's Restaurant, which has been there since 1918. A pretty interesting year for Red Sox fans, too. That one is standing as well. And that's Jay Wallace over there, our producer. So in the middle of the French Quarter, Jane, we are in pretty good shape. And for people who live here or abandon restaurants here, to get out of town on all the warnings, emergency managers say you did exactly the right thing. Because they're stressing today, had the 175-mile-an-hour storm that was a Category 5 come in here, as emergency managers thought it would, this place would be an entirely different story. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the problems that are ongoing here. The president of Jefferson Parish has just come on emergency radio and reminded everyone this entire parish is closed. No one will be allowed back in. On the eastern side of New Orleans, there is what's been described to us by emergency management officials as severe flooding. Along the canal on the west bank of New Orleans, the west bank and the levee system there, which keeps the water out of the city, a number of the pumping stations are down and have been, and the drainage canals have overflowed and are flooding into neighborhoods, especially in the town of Kenner. It's our understanding. So emergency management officials say they originally thought that the levee had broken and that they had enormous problems there, and as it turns out, that wasn't the case at all. The levees have held, but the West Bank still has some pretty severe flooding. Here are a couple of very bad scenarios that they're working through right now. Grand Isle is the spot on the southeastern tip of the state of Louisiana where the storm came ashore when the eye did about 10 after 6 this morning Central Time. They now have 20 feet of water there, excuse me, according to emergency management officials. It's our understanding that 7 people stayed behind on Grand Isle and that those 7 people are now unaccounted for. Here in the city of New Orleans, on the west bank of the city, 2 apartment buildings have collapsed in separate areas. It's their belief that no serious injuries were there because there was no one left behind. There are also some reports of people trapped inside a couple of cars which were submerged, and they're checking on the condition of those 2. About an hour and a half ago, for the first time today, emergency management officials across Jefferson and Orleans Parish were able to go out and assess damage for the first time, and they found that what you see here is not representative of what happened around the rest of the area. There are some pretty severe problems, though not as serious as those along South Mississippi, from Kenner in Louisiana across into Pass Christian and Waveland especially, over into Biloxi and Gulfport and points in between. They're very worried about areas around Waveland because of the severe erosion which will be seen as a result of this wall of water as high as 30 feet, which has come onto shore there, and emergency managers are still waiting to get out and do an assessment of damage there. So that's the scene from inside the French Quarter. They're still demanding that people not be out and about in this neighborhood. No cars allowed on these streets. Police have asked that people stay behind because they're so worried about the possibility of emergency management officials not being able to get in. There's still no power here in the French Quarter, and to hear it from emergency managers, no power throughout the greater New Orleans area. Earlier on emergency radio, we were listening to the chairman and CEO of Energy, which is the power company for all of southeast Louisiana. And the CEO there said that this was the most extensive outage in its history, that 750,000 southeast Louisianans were without power, all of New Orleans without power, and it was the chairman and CEO of the energy company who said that he believed it would be a month at least before all power is restored to southeastern Louisiana. Hardest hit, though, of course, the eastern side of this state and the western side of the state of Mississippi. We'll be getting updates from those 2 on Studio B coming up in just a moment. In addition, we'll go back to the Fox News desk in New York for late updates on the rest of the day's news and the hurricane situation. We're tracking Hurricane Katrina live from the center of New Orleans in the French Quarter on Bourbon Street. I'm Shepard Smith. We're back in 2 minutes.
What this guy was thinking drove directly into those high waters, trying to go somewhere. He landed in water nearly 4 feet high. The driver got out safely, left his car floating near an interstate overpass. Crazy people.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
New video from New Orleans. Pictures just in from downtown. Katrina's damage now being recorded. New video minute by minute. You can see those are high-rise hotels where the windows have been completely blown out. The curtains were streaming outside, and as you can see, the roads there are just flooded everywhere. Lots of destruction. Rescues are underway right now, and unfortunately, looters have taken to the streets. The National Guard has been deployed, and we'll keep you updated on that. Alabama was slammed by Katrina. Grainy video in from Mobile, but you can still see how bad it is. Streets and structures are completely flooded. That's the front of a church right there. Mobile was on the eastern side of the storm's eye wall. We all know what that means. The strongest wind and the highest storm surge. In Gulf Shores, a daycare center's roof is now on the ground. Katrina's outer bands seem to be gobbling up whatever Ivan didn't get last year. In New Orleans, Katrina's winds peeled away parts of the Superdome roof. 9,000 people took shelter there overnight. 2 holes were left in the roof and water poured in. Some people had to move to other areas inside, but government emergency officials don't expect that roof to fail entirely. Also in New Orleans, reporter Brian Andrews was blown down as he tried to walk along Canal Street. Take a look.
And use this as cover. This is what it's like in downtown New Orleans right now. It is just after 8:20 in the morning Eastern time, and stuff is flying down the street. These are the hurricane force winds. All right, that's it, guys. I'm going to come back in. See, debris goes flying. We're going to let it go. All right. Reporting from the hurricane in New Orleans. Come on, let's go for cover. Along with photographer Kevin Martels, we're going to go inside now. I'm Brian Andrews.
Well, certainly showing his stripes out there. Eric Von Anken is getting this minute-by-minute video recovery from the hurricane-stricken area. Eric, anything else? I mean, that's tough to beat right there when it comes to video.
Yeah, and all this stuff is continuing to come down, Lauren, just these intense images. Get to those in a second, but first, a little bit more about these reports of looting. We're getting several more reports, and of course, we've heard about the that one incident at the supermarket and the drugstore and the pictures of that ATM machine we've shown you that was just smashed. And then, of course, there's the people who've come close to losing their lives.
Almost instantly, this driver goes from riding on the pavement to floating above it, but he won't float for long, and the reporter standing nearby knows it. Apparently, the driver didn't know how deep the water was, his car now carried by the currents in what has become a river of rain. The reporter helps the man out of his window to safety. In New Orleans, the water is also everywhere in this parking garage. And just outside it, a man struggles with each step, wandering now that his home is wrecked.
The roof blew off. Everybody okay? Well, they got some people hanging in there.
Windows are shattered on buildings. Some have caved in, and people are stranded on the higher floors. Some heading to the rooftops to wait for help.
And back out live, you can see what we're monitoring. This is a very good example of those folks stuck in their homes. You see this woman and other families just at the front of their houses that just can't go anywhere because the water is so high, right, literally up to their front doors. Now, we do know that some of these folks, especially the ones on the rooftops, have been rescued, but rescuers also know that the conditions are still bad. There are so many people out there that they still just can't get to. Live in the newsroom, Eric Von Anken, Local 6. Lauren.
And we know those waters can be very dangerous, whether it be chemicals or animals or just the actual rush of the water.
A lot of things in there, exactly.
All right, thank you, Eric. President Bush says that Americans should pray for the health and safety of those hit hard by Hurricane Katrina. Before talking about Medicare in Arizona today, the president urged those affected to listen to local police and government officials. And the president is also reportedly considering a release of oil from the nation's petroleum reserve to help offset refinery capacity that was shut down by the storm and help us keep some more money in our pockets. First at 4, we're coming right back. Hurricane Katrina is inland right now. She's a Category 1 hurricane. Moving north, due north. We're going to have a story on help from Central Florida coming up. Stay with us.
Collection of what went on today. If you have not been in front of a newscast all day, maybe you've missed some of these shots. They are ugly. The damage is horrific. It's bad news all across portions of Louisiana, the Panhandle, Mississippi. It's just, well, it's what you'd expect with 145-mile-per-hour winds. It's just ugly. The water is huge in New Orleans.
We've seen massive flooding in the streets here in Central Florida. A local church group from Apopka has already hit the road heading for areas of disaster.
The hurricane zone tonight. John Roberts is heading up our coverage. John?
Good evening to you, Bob. Late this afternoon, New Orleans mayor reported that some 200 people in New Orleans are still stranded on rooftops and that several bodies have been spotted in the water. Preliminary death toll in Louisiana from Hurricane Katrina right now is between 4 to 6 people. Much of the population of New Orleans had been evacuated to higher ground long before the storm hit. That's because so much of this city, the Big Easy, is so easily flooded. It's so exposed. Add to that monster winds, and you've got the makings for widespread damage. Katrina blasted into New Orleans, the most powerful hurricane the Crescent City has seen in modern history. And this monster storm lived up to its billing. New Orleans downtown was strewn with downed trees, windows blown out of high-rises, walls collapsed. The famous French Quarter left with a headache that topped anything from Mardi Gras. It was all a dizzying experience. This man, racing home to see what he had left, lost his car when he drove right into a lake that was the main interstate.
I didn't see the water. It just blends in with the gray of the road, and I just drove right into it.
And he wasn't the only one who suddenly found water everywhere. Much of the city lies about 7 to 10 feet below sea level. This area of New Orleans on the eastern side was flooded earlier today after a levee bordering an industrial canal broke during the height of the storm. For the lucky ones, it was waist deep, chest deep for others. The Mississippi moved right into the living room.
You decided to stay here. Why?
I didn't have no other place to go, really, and didn't think it would be this bad.
It was bad, but city officials had expected much worse. Only that last-minute jog to the east saved New Orleans from catastrophe. A city that had become famous for near misses took a hard punch, but not the knockdown it could have been. About 9,000 people here in New Orleans took shelter in the Louisiana Superdome, the home of the New Orleans Saints. But even that huge building couldn't offer complete refuge from the storm. Lee Cowan has that part of the story.
Never before has a stadium hosted fans quite like this. Hungry, tired, wet, and thankful.
I'm very grateful for this Superdome, because without it, I don't know where we would have went.
The people who came here, nearly 10,000 at last count, simply had nowhere else to go. They were either too sick, too old, or too poor to flee the storm in time.
We just waiting till we ride the storm out.
As riding it out goes, it was all going fine, considering it was the middle of a Category 4 storm.
We can hear it rattling, and I think the people in here are pretty happy to be inside.
Until inside became outside.
Here's where it gets a little disconcerting. We've been here for the better part of the night, and really for the first time, it sounds as if the roof is starting to peel off the Superdome. I don't know whether you can hear it in the background there, but it's also starting to show its effects. This is the roof leaking from about 300 feet above, and it's not just here, it's in spots all around the dome.
Those leaks slowly became waterfalls. The roof they were all so thankful for started crashing in.
Scared everybody, scared me.
It barely missed Alexanderson. Before he and thousands of other refugees knew it, the roof was full of holes. Katrina had found her way in.
We still caught it pretty good last year.
Residents scurried to higher, drier ground, choosing to camp out on the beer-stained floor of the stadium. That's where thousands remain tonight. A new breed of saint for this NFL stadium. Wet, weary, but alive. Lee Cowan, CBS News, New Orleans.
As bad as things got here in New Orleans, when the eye of the storm shifted ever so slightly to the east, the strongest part of Hurricane Katrina shifted to the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. Jim Acosta is in Biloxi tonight.
It seemed like Katrina would never quit. For 8 long hours, hurricane-force winds and driving rains pounded the Mississippi Gulf Coast. It was like nothing this area has seen in a generation.
This is as bad as Camille. This is bad news here.
The beach, like much of Biloxi, is underwater. Katrina flooded homes and turned cars into bumper boats, with a dangerous storm surge as high as 22 feet.
Storm surge has been much bigger than anything ever before. The result has been, in some cases, people being trapped in their homes, trapped in other buildings.
Just to give you an idea of the storm surge here, we're standing out in front of this local highway patrol building. There used to be a road here. Now it's totally covered with water, and it may look like the Gulf of Mexico, but it's actually the Intracoastal Waterway.
In less than a minute, it was a foot deep.
Within hours, the rising threat filled up the first floor of the patrol headquarters, creating a 12-foot deep aquarium that buckled the walls and even fooled the fish.
This building is held, you know, it's withstand hurricanes before. It's going to flood. We'll keep moving upstairs if we have to. and then we just rebuild it.
How many floors do we have in this building?
We have six floors, so we have a lot of stairs.
That meant much of the rescue work had to be done out of the dispatch room.
We're going to get you out of there. Just, okay, you need to calm down now.
We were there as a call came in from a woman stranded in her car with her 88-year-old father. Water lapping at the door.
They're stuck on the long bridge and the water is coming up over the bridge.
Help arrived just in time.
They got her on
area code 228.
Emergency crews plan to launch rescue boats as soon as it's safe. Even after the frantic warnings to evacuate, a few diehards, some with small children, took their chances.
This house survived Camille. We know if we board the windows, if we lock things down, if we hunker down, as they say on TV, then we'll be okay.
After being trapped inside all day long, we're just getting our first chance to look at the damage here. Homes are wrecked, cars are ruined, trees are down, but authorities tell us this is nothing. The devastation is everywhere. John?
Because it swept right over so many offshore rigs in the Gulf of Mexico before it came ashore, Hurricane Katrina sent the price of oil soaring on world markets. Mark Strassman in Baton Rouge now has more on the economic impact of this storm.
Wherever you live, Katrina's gonna cost you. Out in the Gulf of Mexico, the monster hurricane barreled through the heart of U.S. oil and gas refinery operations. The real long-term worry is any damage Katrina caused critical infrastructure, like those rigs and undersea pipelines. And refineries sitting in low-lying coastal areas may also have flooded. Some have called it a perfect storm to drive up gas prices.
They have no idea the magnitude of this damage. Is it a matter of days before things go back to normal, or a matter of weeks, or could be a matter of months?
Operations in the Gulf pump out almost 1.5 million barrels of oil a day. That's 1/4 of the U.S. output. Turn off those pumps and prices you pay almost have to surge to new records. Last year, Hurricane Ivan stormed through the Gulf. Oil and gas infrastructure was so damaged, repairs took months. Oil prices jumped by almost 20%, and that spike has never really come back down. Katrina's damage could be that much worse. The first Category 5 hurricane to storm through the same oil field.
That's the big fear, there'd be an Ivan repeat, but possibly even worse.
So today, because of Katrina, oil traded briefly above a landmark $70 a barrel. A good sign you can expect another jump in prices you pay at the pump, almost immediately.
It'll be a couple of days at least before energy companies learn the full scope of the damage, learn whether their world has crashed down around them, and we learn how much more every American will have to pay for that damage at the pump. Bob?
Thank you very much, Mark, and stand by there for just a second, because I want to chat with all of you after watching these pieces across the Gulf Coast tonight. John Roberts, I take it we can't really even make an estimate yet of what the casualties are going to be until people have a chance to get out into these areas.
Oh, no, Bob. I mean, they only know what they can see at this point, and really all they can see is a small piece of the eastern part of New Orleans. I was there, and really it is just as far as you can see, water everywhere. There are people who are asking for help. They can't get help. We called 911. 911 said, we can't help you. You've got to go somewhere else. So it's going to take some time, and when they get into all of those parishes that are down toward the Mississippi Delta, where it comes out there into the Gulf, that's going to take an awfully long time, Bob.
And Mark Strassman, what are they worried about in the areas where you've been today?
I think most of the worry, Bob, is from people from New Orleans who rode up the storm here in Baton Rouge. I mean, most of the damage in Baton Rouge is actually fairly general. Down trees, power lines. The folks from New Orleans who rode it out, if they see damage like this, I think what they're going to say to themselves is, when we go home, if our neighborhood only looks this bad, we got off easy.
And John, I take it one thing that is really of concern to me is I watched Lee Cowan's piece from inside the Superdome there. It's amazing that people weren't hurt when that roof, those big pieces of that roof fell in. Is there any report of injuries over there that you know of?
Not at the Superdome itself, Bob, but we've heard reports of minor injuries coming in from across the city. But it appears, though, that most people did heed the warnings. They either got out of town or they got into shelter. It seems that the casualties are going to be among those people who decided to ride it out at home.
And what about drinking water?
There's a little bit of water in some areas, not a lot in others. It's definitely going to be a problem, particularly, Bob, in that area it's under 5 feet of water. There's No water lines there, no sewage. That's a potential health problem brewing.
Okay, well, this one is not over yet. Clearly, we'll be finding out a lot more tomorrow. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Mark, and all of you down there. Coming up, more about those oil and gas prices, because the CBS News cross-country price patrol is on the road tonight.
Yet in the middle of it all, 3 unassuming young men became heroes.
Basically, you know, just took a life jacket, tied one end of the rope around the life jacket, and tried to drop it down to him.
The Western Kentucky students were out taking photos when they spotted Greg Nelson in the water below the 610 bridge.
I heard these guys right here up top hollered me, asked me how long I've been down there, and told me to hang on. So I told them I'm hanging on.
But Nelson had already been clinging to a piece of debris for 2 exhausting hours.
It's right on your side! It's right on your side! Kind of difficult because of the wind, you know, it's so windy, and he's confused, been in the water a long time, so you have to communicate and just, you know, try and try and try.
Each time they threw the rope, they battled the elements.
The wind, the rain and wind be hitting me on my face, and I can see that good.
Finally, their efforts pay off as yet another Good Samaritan came by to help at a time when virtually no one else was on this stretch of road.
It felt good, you know, it's like we can help this guy out, maybe we can help some other people out.
Thank God they came along.
You were getting tired at that point.
I was getting tired.
And what would you say to these young college students?
Oh, I told them thank you, thank you, thank you.
And that was Fox's Patty Shea reporting. And before we show you even more destruction video tonight.
Worked its way towards New Orleans earlier this morning, made landfall with winds of 145 miles per hour at approximately 6:40 in the morning. Again, the east end of New Orleans was actually hit the hardest compared to the west end of downtown. Right now, just a fantastic view before sunset. You'll see this only here at Fox, this beautiful shot of Hurricane Katrina just as it was working its way east of New Orleans. You can see that earlier today. And once again, the outer eye wall stayed about 40 miles to the east of the downtown area. Again, very, very important that it stayed just to the east of downtown New Orleans, keeping the brunt of the strongest wind and rain just to the east of the downtown area. Right now, the winds are still 65 miles per hour with Tropical Storm Katrina. It is moving north-northwest at 21. It looks like the system will continue to weaken, but still a lot of wind and rain with it. I'll talk much more about how much more wind and rain and what's going to happen in our local forecast.
Video out of the Gulf Coast tonight. It could have been the end for one man if it wasn't for the Coast Guard. He was stranded on top of his roof there, but rescue crews strapped him in, and he was pulled up to that helicopter. More than 50 people were rescued from flooded neighborhoods. Hurricane Katrina putting this ready, taking advantage of stores that are damaged and abandoned. Looters packed the streets, filling carts to the brim with stuff, some running with their arms full, as you see there. Police officers are casing this trash store. Someone ripped apart an ATM, of all things, for some quick cash. Some fast hands went through a pharmacy as well. Looters grabbed as many prescriptions from there as they could.
Block area of Mobile's downtown swallowed by Katrina's relentless storm surge.
You ever think you'd see water this high down here?
Never thought I would see it. Never did. I had to come out and see it for myself. I've been hearing it on the news, and I just wanted to come out and just see it. It's really awesome.
By mid-afternoon, Pensacola Bay had risen 10 to 12 feet above flood stage, but Mobile Bay swelled to 15 feet.
Well, this is incredible. I've lived 1979, and I've never seen the bay like this.
Wind damage is extensive, more than 100 miles from where Katrina's eye passed, and persistent squall lines and closed bridges kept evacuees away and in the dark about what awaits at home.
It's just stressful and aggravating, but I mean, you know, it's just way of life on the Gulf Coast, man.
While back in Mobile, we found New Orleans residents like Sharon Clark and Brandon Cole fearing and hearing the worst as well.
I don't know how things are. I know I'm going home to nothingness, though.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah, I saw some of the news, and the houses are flooded all the way to the rooftops.
They're looking for people in trees on top of the roofs because the levee broke, and so there's like 7 to 8 feet of water in certain areas. Yeah. So we're not looking to going back to a home, just probably to some rubbish that we'll have to clean up and start all over with.
And that was Mark Wilson reporting.